Hi, good evening, Roy.
Good evening, Warren. How are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm really good. Hope you had a good week there.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I mean, we're working our way through the cold of January here, and it's actually the middle of January, which is really incredible.
I'd say we're over the hump at least. Yeah, we've had a
Yeah,
bunch of cold and snow ourselves, but mid-January, yeah, we're well over halfway through the season. So that's the positive spin, I guess.
yeah, they're calling for about 6 to 10 inches of snow in New Jersey, so we'll see what happens in the next 24 hours. But on a positive note, uh, the next episode, which is this episode that we're going to be talking about today, which is actually going to be tomorrow, which will be Sunday. Not to get confusing. Today is tomorrow. Is episode 13 talking about going over the hump. We have actually covered half of the first season of year one of Space 1999 already. That's pretty impressive.
I really can't believe it. Yeah, it's gone by so quickly, and this is very exciting. Yes, you're absolutely right. We're in the back half of the season, as they'd say, and in my mind, some of the best episodes yet to come. This next batch of 12. So, and very excited for Collision Course. Yes, spoilers.
Ah, ah, ah.
Where's that? You got that ITC synopsis?
I do. And it goes something like this. Who is ARRA? She is old, older than Earth itself, with a beauty that only age can bring. Commander Koenig's encounter with her is also an encounter with destiny. It all happens when the moon is on a collision with a planet that is many times its size. And of course, as Warren has unveiled, we are discussing episode 13, year one of Space 1999, Collision Course.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll come back with a couple of very special guests. Thanks for that, Roy. And yes, very excited. This is one of my favorites, so it's going to be a good show.
Absolutely. Woo.
And here we go. Yes, Collision Course. Welcome to Richard Bendell and Nancy. Nancy, is it Ale?
It's Ehle.
It's Ehle. I'm
Ehle.
sorry.
You would never know it by looking at it.
Nancy Ehle. Well, thank you both very much for your time and contributions to this episode. This is going to be a very special show. We're so glad that you could both join us this week.
Great to see you both, too. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
Thank
It's great
you.
to see you, too. Happy New Year.
Hi, everyone.
You bet, you bet. So did you guys do a little bit of research and review the episode here in the last few days?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever see the show?
Time immemorial.
Yes, that's right.
See, that's usually my line, Roy. I'm usually the one with the smart ass quips.
Yeah, I know. I figured I'd throw you off a little bit. I have to say though, the lead into this episode at the very beginning with the teaser is one of the most powerful for this series, especially for the season, not and the series, just is far as how it takes off. And
Yeah.
we're really happy to have you on here to talk about it, because this is definitely a fan favorite with most people, and definitely for myself as well as Warren. Warren was just saying before it's one of his favorites. So we're really interested to hear about your feelings about the episode and your takes, and yeah, just to talk about it.
For sure, Roy. It does. The opening. I'm glad you brought that up, because it really says to the viewer in a couple of ways that this is going to be a big episode. And the thing most fans will recognize, hardcore fans like ourselves, is that it's one of the few episodes that doesn't have the famous timpani roll into the opening credits. It's just like that explosion happens and boom,
Right.
You're there, right? Sort of like the opening of our show. Actually, we don't have the timpani roll.
Yeah, it's the opening of our show is just an explosion.
Where were you guys blowing up again?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Like The Martian, where's the earth-shattering kaboom?
yeah.
I really appreciate your opening. The visuals are incredible.
Well, that is thanks to Warren.
Catherine Bugeaud, of course.
Catherine, I thought it was Catherine's work. Yeah,
just
it's amazing.
knocked it out of the park. She does our banners. Each and every week, she does a different banner for a different episode, so that we can update the YouTube channel. And yeah, she came up with that opening, and it's just we had so much fun with it when with Roy and I in the spacesuits there, and
Yeah, she's incredible with her work, and it never gets old watching it, and we can't thank her enough.
Yeah, and it's if you didn't notice, I mean, I fell in love with it right away, because it's clips from all 24 episodes of year one in production order, which is exactly what we're doing here. So
right on.
Yeah, a lot of thought went into that one for sure. So thank you, Catherine. So folks, and aside from the opening, now Roy, there's something else that sort of sets this episode a little bit apart, and it's very early on in the episode again with Koenig and his emotional reaction to the situation.
Yes.
Which we didn't see very often. I mean, Koenig was pretty stoic and rarely showed emotion like that. So it was interesting. Do you think that was really laid out in the script, or was that something that was maybe a little more just come up with on the spot on the set?
I mean, personally, I think it was part of the script. I think, however, as far as the way it was delivered, that's all Martin Landau. I mean, an actor can interpret a script and go in many different directions with that, but I think the humanity aspect that Martin Landau brings to the storyline, to the script, is definitely demonstrated in its performance, and it is conveyed in a very natural and powerful way. And just showing the range of the actor that he was and is in this episode is an example. So to answer your question, I think it's a combination of both in regards to that. And it really shows the, his feelings for Alan Carter. And especially when Alan is putting himself on the line here, and he, essentially, by all accounts, he's not going to make it. I mean, it's like a death sentence, but he's sacrificing himself for the Alphans. And that's why I don't want to go down a negative part, but I'm just going to throw this out there real quick. When Space 1999 has been accused in the past of not showing emotions and feelings, and I mean, this is a prime example of where that is not true. I mean, this episode definitely hits that.
Yeah.
The entire episode, the performances, from everybody throughout, and Martin Landau and Nick Tate in particular, just because of their situation, their characters in the moment, and they're sort of being influenced by ARRA, just brilliant.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think Nick Tate did just a fantastic job in that command module, trying to get that mind to release. Like, he really sold that. By the way, he had to get out of his chair and go across to the other side and play around with the panels over there, and just the intensity on his face. Like, he really played that well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nance, because he's really selling the moment, and
That's right. Yeah.
it's not working. I mean, and then it's the perfect setup too, because the Eagles having a problem getting there. I mean, it should have been there, minutes before. So, the other Eagles have laid the charges. So it's having a problem with the booster. Then he's trying to lay the mine. The mine won't, the
Yeah.
release mechanism
It's
gets
just
jammed.
one thing after another.
Yeah, you talking like about a bad day. And then, when he takes it and he tries to basically slam it down, I mean, he's desperate. It's like, what am I going to do? Then the only other option he had, if that didn't work, essentially would have been to jettison the passenger module. But even
Right.
with that, the problem is it potentially could have triggered the nuclear mine, and everything would have blown anyway. So, but that may have been potentially
Even the way he slammed it into the asteroid could have triggered the mine. That was my thought when he did it, right?
exactly.
Well, he figures I might be dead anyways. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny in rewatching it, and not to cut you off, Nancy, but
Yeah, no worries.
I kind of consider the opening to Collision Course this is their James Bond episode. It's got the countdown. It's got the dramatic moments. It's got the sense of danger and death and all that. And you're right, Nancy. He pulls it off. Everything works. He's his feelings and I have to get this done. And he knows everyone in Alpha feels the same way. And just trying to we're trying to reboot a computer that won't work, and that felt stressful. He's got everything on the line, and like you said, nothing's working. It's like, what the heck do I have to do here? But that's kind of the feeling I got. It's a real countdown moment, and everything about it is it has to be now. And I thought it was perfect segue when you see, he's dropped the charge, he's flying, and just the Eagle just gets just barely out of the screen, and then a fantastic special effects explosion, and you don't know what's happened. You have no idea, alive or dead. It's a very convincing action start to an episode that, to me, shows that space was mini movies, not mini episodes. It was a mini movie, and that for me is kind of, again, that's what that demonstrates, the 007 countdown type of thing.
Very, very good point to both of you. And yeah, the overall, you see the dramatic tension, and this circles back to Lando's performance and whether or not it was scripted. And I think clearly it was, because when you come back after the break, as the viewer, we don't know if Alan's made it or not, just like Koenig, right? So the script is playing into the fact that as the viewer, you're wondering and you're worried just as much as the Alphans are at that point.
Yeah.
And then also the dramatic tension, not only with Alan triggering, getting that to release, but then on the flip side of it, there's the tension on the base, because essentially that Eagle mine should have been there already in place, because it's traveling closer and closer to the moon. And essentially, the closer it gets to Alpha, even if they do detonate it, there's the potential that it could actually, blow up, affect Alpha on different levels. And Koenig is dealing with the tension of, Bergman, who's pretty much trying to be the voice of reason, that, this has to be done. And Koenig knowing that Alan is, behind schedule, he says, delay the blast for 40 seconds. And then Bergman right away says, we can't do it. We got to avoid the blast ourselves. And then Koenig says, delay the blast for 40 seconds. And Kano just was like, and then he just kind of looks like, and he does it. And there's that. And then after that all happens, and Alan is dealing with the situation, and that 40 seconds isn't enough, and then he finally gets it to go, Koenig even gives him another 10 seconds. He says, 10 seconds.
And it's funny you say that now, Roy, because on Alan's side, he realizes, no matter what I do, if even if I succeed, they may have to blow it because time's run out.
Yeah.
So as much as they're feeling the tension, he knows I might be dead anyways. I could do everything possible, and they have to push that button. I'm done. The explosion is going to be right there, and I hadn't thought of that before. It's a whole other thing to imagine. I'm going to sacrifice myself. It's something else to think somebody's might push the button that takes me out of existence type of thing. But it's a great intro, and to think that's the start of the episode.
Yeah, exactly. It goes right into it. It's such, I remember the first time I saw this episode, and I was just like, wow. And this was, pardon the pun, many, many, many moons ago. But I was just like, and even with the music, I mean, we're cues right in. It's just, and to your point, Warren brought up that point. We don't hear that, the lead up with the drums. It's just bam, it goes right in. And then we have the whole episode to look forward to. It's like, now what's going to happen?
Yeah.
There's a lot of little cool things about Collision Course. If I can, for this episode, it comes into play in a later scene. And it was actually our daughter who was watching it with me probably 14 years ago, and she noticed it. In this episode sequence, if you see Sandra, she bobbles a cup, a coffee cup. What's fascinating about that is when the scene's actually in the episode, you can see the coffee cup is by her hand. So it almost looks like they didn't reshoot the shot. She bobbled it, and then they just ran with it. They cut the bobbling, but they left the other parts of her talking, and you can see the cup that she knocked over by accident. And it's like, there's some interesting continuity, because they kept, it's funny they would keep that, because really it's a mistake.
Right.
But in reality, if you consider Alpha as being a real place, she knocked the cup over.
Yeah, things happen like that.
Things happen. And I thought it was very observant of her to spot that. But I'm always amazed, no matter how many times I watch episodes, and this is just one example, there's always a little something in the background with one of the characters, something that's like, wow, because the clarity of the Blu-rays, things you didn't notice before.
Yeah, it's definitely opened up a lot of doors for us with the Blu-rays. It's and we were talking about this off behind the scenes in the green room. I'll say it in the green room. That Brian Johnson had commented a few years back when, in discussion, that a lot of the effects were not intended to be shown with Blu-ray because it's high definition. I mean, and you think about how the effects, I would say the majority of the effects for Space 1999 have held up to this day. I mean, there's probably only a few that I would say you could say, okay, you makes you say, but for all intents and purposes, 50 years later, it's pretty darn good.
Yeah, for sure. And there's actually some great model work in here. It's a great episode if you're a fan of the Rescue Eagle.
Yes. This was the first appearance since Earthbound that it was back, which was great to see. Yeah.
Lots of airtime, and I just love the shot of Alan's Burnt Eagle with the back half all charred, and wow, just looks great.
Wow. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say about the radiation cloud. I mean, that was amazing as well too.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rich. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Another interesting thing, kind of, there's all little bits and pieces that are of familiarity, I'll call it. We saw John in Missing Link, and he's crashed over on the console. If you look closely, Alan's almost identical type of thing. Crash, blood, he doesn't have the cut exactly. He's this big goose egg, but he's got the blood in that. And I'm just kind of looking, going, that's interesting. It's almost a mirror for mirror kind of shot, but again, now it's Alan instead of John in that position.
Never noticed that before. Interesting.
Just a lot of, and it's kind of like that way through the episode. The command, there's so much in this episode. There's command conferences, the ensemble, a lot of the extras get a moment of time that we don't always see in some episodes.
That's right. And I thought that Prentice Hancock got a lot of time in this episode, and I really appreciate his acting as an adult now. When I was a kid and watched the show, I didn't really care for his character. I didn't think he was really realistic. But then I had the opportunity. I worked in the main operations center for a Class 1 railroad here in Canada. and saw how operations managers, somebody in his position, how they ran things. And you know what? He nailed it. He really nailed it as an actor. And this is one of the episodes where I really appreciated him. I mean, he had quite a bit of screen time, and jumping into action the way he did to get things moving and whatnot. I mean, yeah, I thought he really played that well. Yeah.
He to me, he was exactly what you want as a commander, somebody who will take action, make tough decisions, you know, and that's sometimes the hardest position to be in. You're not the boss, but you have to stay connected to the, you know, to everybody. And I was actually a huge fan of Prentice Hancock, and we didn't get to see him in too many, you know, high profile moments. But Last Sunset is obviously a favorite. And like you said, Nancy, here he steps up. Who do they turn to when, well, John's obviously got radiation sickness or whatever, and Paul's the one. You can kind of see his face. Not only do I have to take over, but I got to go against my commanders. So I thought he was a great, like you said, he represented what that position is like in real life on Alpha, and it's a thankless job.
He was very level-headed in the role for the most part too. This episode, we see him get a little more emotionally charged, and which we didn't see so much, say, in Breakaway. And I think that just added to the episode.
Yeah, and I would agree with both of you. And I think what was happening too is, and this is one of the things we're going, you know, why we are going in production order. His character really was becoming more developed as time went on. I think in the earlier episodes, he was effective in his position, but I think just like any of us, the longer we are doing different duties, or, you know, whether it's in work or, you know, different relationships, different scenarios, different situations, things do evolve. And with his character and the situations that he was dealing with the different stories, that was also evolving as well. And he was becoming he was becoming a stronger character. He's becoming more effective. And this really is brought out, and I would agree with Rich too, with his performance too. And just the way he demonstrates it. Again, it's just not words on a page. It's the way he effectively emotes that. And it's interesting when Koenig is thought to be lost in that mammoth spaceship, our ship, and then he comes out. Morrow is really, you know, he's like, you know, Commander, you're all right. I mean, he's worried about Koenig. And then, you know, Koenig is like, I'm fine. But then he tells him just, you know, put everything on hold. And then what happens is he goes from the emotional Morrow to the second in command Morrow, where, like, you know, repeat, you know, what are you saying? You know, it's not adding up, you know, because of knowing about the whole thing, everything that they've gone through in the command conference that you mentioned and everything. And, you know, this new scenario that's happening where they are dealing with this potential collision course of the moon with this planet. They just got out of one situation where they barely escaped having to blow up that asteroid. Now there's no way that they're going to be able to do that. And the only thing that they have is this slim chance of hope that they were all in agreement with before he went out to explore. And now he's coming back. And before he comes back, he's basically just saying, you know, scrap the plan. And it's like, what are you talking about? I mean, us as the viewers know about ARRA. We know that what she represents from the discussion that Koenig has had with her. But from Morrow's point of view, he knows none of this. So you have to effectively put yourself into that position. And I think really Paul really demonstrates that, and is effective. Prentice is effective in his acting and his performance of somebody that's almost like torn between what should be and what should not be, and, you know, has to get to the root of it.
Yeah, and it might even agree entirely. In this episode, we are definitely seeing the evolution of his character, and maybe those involved in the show started to appreciate, like, Prentice just doesn't have to sit in his chair barking out commands here and there whenever he's filling in. he was tremendous in Last Sunset. Fantastic fight scene. And then you look forward, and then we find out some of his backstory in Voyager's Return.
Yeah.
And you start to learn more and more about his character. He gets to be a bit funny in Full Circle. Like, I love how his character started to get more important moments.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you think of Mission of the Darians too.
Yeah.
Like, a big fight scene. Hey, he can be physical. He can be logical. He can be commanding in his own way. But he always, if this comes across the way I mean it, he always knew his role and his place. I need to be there when Alpha and everyone, the commander, needs me. And that's actually a very special type of person to have, that kind of person you can rely on. And Alan tended to be that, but on the more emotional side, right? And he's a pilot. He gets to go out and do all these cool things. Paul's got to do I got to sit in main mission and almost be the Picard in an odd way, right? He was the guy that was in main mission more often than not. Where when you think of the Next Generation, and it was Riker that'd go out and do everything.
Yes.
But it was kind of cool to see Paul on the away team for a change in an Eagle cockpit, which we didn't see very often as well. No, I think absolutely to everything you guys have just been covering. And again, it comes back to production order or not. And the more and more I think about this, Roy, and the more we go through this week by week, the more I can see it. The continuity was there. Yeah. So what you guys are talking about is exactly this. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in Missing Link, when Koenig was unconscious, there was doubt as to who was going to take over. And Alan says, "So who's going to take over? You, Paul? You, Connor? The man in the moon, huh?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
By the time Collision Course rolls around, there's no debate. It's like Helena just says, "Paul, you'll have to take over."
Yep.
Right.
And that's demonstrating that the character did grow and develop.
Yeah. That's right.
And they wanted him. Like, we need somebody who can, cover that position. And I don't think they were imagining it would be more than the time John would be out, and this, they would set off the charges and all that. But it could be longer, right? And would, if the show, imagine a second season and the Landos are like, hey, we got a movie offer or something, I honestly think, as much as I like Martin and Barbara, of course, I think the show could have gone on with the characters they had and the cast they had, because they were so good. But that's my personal take. And I'm not saying I wanted to see the Landos gone or even all the changes that happened necessarily. But I really liked the cast they had. And again, the ensemble in this episode really all seem to have their moment, their chance to kind of, have that, even if it's a couple seconds.
Yep.
If I may, I realize I'm talking a lot here.
No.
Go ahead. Sarah Bullen in this episode, she looks wonderful. Her hair looks really kind of modern-like, and you see her in different scenes in that. And one of the things I noticed rewatching the episode is John finally has a nice comm lock, but only for the first half of the episode. And if you look closely, there's a scene with Sarah, and she's wearing it, the scrunched up buttons. Yes. And then you get to the command conference afterwards, after going to ARRA's ship, and John's got the scrunchy buttons again. I'm like, hey, what's
that was part of the
nice comment. Like, did Sarah switch it, when he wasn't looking? I don't know. Anyways, I just thought I'd mention that. It was just another odd thing that just kind of,
If you actually take a minute also too, in speaking about the comlock, there's also another scene when he is in the command module, when he's actually inside our ship. If you look at the comlock that he pulls out, because the buttons are actually, the red and the white, it's flipped. And there's actually, it's more of the, I'll call it the hero, because there were different comlocks. They actually had the working comlock, which is the one that David Hirsch currently, has. He's had it, for like a lifetime now, which is amazing to see. We've seen it in person, which is really cool. there's also what they call like the hero comlock, where it has all the different specific details on it. So for the close-up shots, and then there's the comlocks that are pretty much like the props that, you know, the one that you're referring to where the buttons are scrunched. I think it's been termed the wonky comlock. I think that's something that's floating on the internet. They refer to it as that because the buttons are sometimes missing. In fact, I think and they're close together. But in that one scene, you can see when he pulls it out and he's holding it, it's actually that one that has the additional detail. So it is kind of cool to see these little moments with that. In regards to the characters, though, the behind, you know, Sarah Bullen, you see her in the background. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any dialogue in the first year of Space 1999, but she is a familiar presence, and she did make her way to becoming Kate in the second series. But also Tanya. Tanya was one of my favorites as far as background performers. And, you know, right from Breakaway, she actually had some dialogue. And in The Last Sunset, she was given Kano's position where she was utilized a lot. And unfortunately, it really never went to that next level with her. And she kind of got more in the background, but she would have been another character that would have been really great to have seen more of. And it just like Prentice and Clifton, it's really sad that, and of course, Barry, it's really a shame that she did not make it into the second year of Space 1999. It would have been, she was just, you know, a wonderful presence and a wonderful human being to have met too.
I couldn't agree more. I think I'll use the word underutilized.
Yes, that's exactly.
Well, it's really interesting. One of the things I noticed in this particular episode is when Paul and Victor they're in main mission and they're talking about the, you know, getting the Eagles in position and all that, and you just watch the activity in the room. It's so interesting to see because there's one of the actors is standing beside Sandra, looks over her shoulder and he's making notes, and the next thing you know, he comes into frame from another angle and hands a piece of paper to Tanya, turns around and he's gone. You see somebody up in the back checking the computer panels up top. It just gives such a sense of how that operation is just so active. There's just so much stuff going on, which makes sense in an operations center.
And that's the importance of background performers, because without the background performers, you would not sell the moment. And it's interesting that you said that, you're saying that, because they're, as you said, Nance, they're exchanging, you know, paperwork. You could see Tanya, she's like, you know, looking at the paper and then she's clicking different buttons. And you see the other performers doing the same thing, and it really makes it seem like a functional base, and it just really adds to the moment. So it's just
it's realistic. If you've ever been in a transportation operations center, it's realistic. There's stuff going on. The important folks, right, who make the decisions are there, and they're maybe you've got an incident happening out on the rail line, right? You've got the guys are there, the locomotive managers, your operations managers, they're in conference right there on the spot, and everybody else is around them in the periphery, still carrying on and doing their duties. It's realistic.
They're there for a reason.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up too, and I always kind of considered it almost like a subliminal, is the fact that when now Koenig is in a hurry he wants to get to main mission because he's got the data from, you know, Alan's Eagle, and even, you know, he's going through the command module into the passenger module, which was a really kind of cool shot. Then he goes into the interim where, you know, before he goes into the travel tube, and then you see the lights changing, and he knows that their medical is performing the radiation check. And then he tells, you know, Helena to skip the check because, you know, they're in trouble. And anyway, he gets checked. Dr. Bob, you know, says, you know, he's clear. He goes out. He arrives in main mission. He's in his spacesuit, something that you don't see very often, unless, you know, the next time I think that would happen would be probably Space Brain. And he's, you know, going through the discussion and everything. And then it cuts to Alan, you know, where he's being brought into medical, and then they're pretty much transferring him onto the bed. The scene comes back, and he's giving his spacesuit. He's got, you know, handing his suit off to, I think her name was Judy. She gives him a towel, and he keeps like drying himself. And I thought for whatever reason, that scene always made me think of, why is he perspiring a lot? What's going on? Is that like a subliminal that maybe he's got radiation poisoning or something? It's just in my mind, I always kind of, and I remember that from a while ago. It just kind of struck me that, maybe he wasn't feeling well. Did you kind of pick up on that? Or I'm just curious if you got, if the three
I
of you
didn't
had.
notice that so much from the towel as I did from him doing this. He went to his forehead a few times. And that's what, and I would have said the same type of thing. Does he have radiation sickness? Right.
Yeah. But little.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Well, I think it's all tying back into, we all talked about how tense that opening was, but this is playing off of that and creating that.
Yeah.
I think the director was trying to really relay the sense of urgency, right?
Yeah.
Even right from the moment in the tube, right? I mean, there was no reason to show that other than to create that sense of urgency.
That's right.
Right?
Exactly.
So, but just the little tidbits that really sold the episode and the premise of, like you guys were all saying, like because as the viewer, we've seen ARRA, right? So we kind of know what's going on, but the regular characters, right? They're all suspecting them of being cuckoo, right? And not acting themselves, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic that that was set up with all these little behind the scenes and these things going on in the back. Everything, it's a brilliant episode. I love it.
Speaking of director, got to credit Ray Austin. He was the director of this episode. I mean, he's done a lot. He's had done a lot so far. Well, he's done a few episodes, and he went on to do so much for the series, and it comes through, especially with the different camera angles. And the lighting was very effective as well too. Brilliant.
You know what? We're 39 minutes in. We haven't even talked about ARRA yet. Believe it or not, there's so much going on. Right? I'm not sure how you guys are doing for time, but it's you know what? All those scenes when Koenig goes into her ship. Sorry, excuse me. Just wow, like incredibly creepy and eerie.
I mean,
and the lighting in that great hall of ARRA's, the music is a piece that they used at the beginning of Death Southern Dominion, but they just slowed it down. They played it at half speed, and wow, is it ever effective.
Well, another effective piece that I found was when Koenig is sitting in that command module just after he gets into ARRA's ship, and there's absolute silence. There's no music, there's no sound effects until you hear that door slide open behind him. And no music in that shot. I thought that was brilliant because it really did bring a bit of a haunting feeling to it, right?
Right, because then it's pitch black too. That's the only time, I mean, we really see an eagle. I mean, where they're in the eagle, where it's dark like that. It's like,
there's
why
no
did all
power.
There's no, exactly. I mean, it is just like total darkness. And to your point, the door just creeps open, and then he's trying to contact Alpha, and then out comes the laser gun. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right.
Well, the space always liked to play against type, and by that they had actors in roles that were opposite of the characters we usually knew them in. And Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, for example. What's interesting in the whole ARRA scene is that it's dark, it's spooky, and yet it's actually the place where Koenig learns to a degree what's going on. It's certainly a lot more than everyone else. It's funny, everyone on Alpha they're the ones in the dark.
Yeah.
So they're presenting is ARRA threatening? Is she something to be worried? There's cobwebs. It looks like a place of death, but it's not. We find out it's a place of transition, and they're waiting. They've been waiting a long time, and it's not just ARRA. We never learn who else. We know that there are others, spiritual. Whatever we might think they are. I definitely think they're a life force of some kind, but they've been waiting, and somehow they knew the moon, the Alphans, John were coming. And what do they have to do now that they're there? Nothing.
Nothing.
Imagine a show, think of any movie or show where it's always about, wait, what do we have to do? And then I would say I would put this episode up against any other, and I'm open for discussion. What other episode have you ever seen where what they're supposed to do is nothing?
You're
And
absolutely
nothing,
right. Where there's no MacGuffin, where there's
no.
no character motivation. But yeah, that's amazing, Richard. Yes, and I won't argue a point of that up until that time, and then beyond that, I will say that the other series that did that very, very well and effectively in the '90s, a show about nothing, was Seinfeld.
There you go. Yeah. I knew that was
funny.
Oh, that's true. I will admit, and I really thought it was a show about nothing, but I was not a Seinfeld fan.
But no, I mean
about that though. I mean, there's so much buildup where she's expressing to Koenig what's going to happen to her people and how everything is going to change, and this has been something that is, is a result of destiny of them coming together. And then, it's like you're waiting for what it's going to be. It's like, what are we supposed to do? And it's just that, before she even says anything, you're wondering, especially seeing this the first time, what would they have to do with everything that's happening? And for her to just say it, and she says it straight too. It's just the way she conveys it. And it's almost like, what?
And it's against human nature, I think, to do nothing. But sometimes it is the best thing. Sometimes we have to let certain things kind of unfold as they are. We to try and change it is just, it's not going to improve the situation. Some people, if I can phrase it this way, they got to learn the hard way. Not that that applies to the Alphans per se, but it's interesting that they throw up this idea. John's telling them, "Oh, what's ARRA going to do? I don't know. What are we supposed to do? Nothing." It's like, no, we can't sit here and do nothing.
We have to do
and we're
something.
not going to sit here and do nothing. Yet that's what is required. It's again, it's playing against type. Something the show, for me personally, did again and again, and did it in a way that makes you think that just because everyone says it should be this, it's not always necessarily true. The world is the universe is a mysterious place. That's what I'll say.
Well, and it's a leap of faith. And that's the other thing. Anthony Terwilliger, who wrote this episode, I mean, a lot of his writing really dealt with that. And I mean, we'll be discussing it when we go into year 2, but he also, there's a common theme with Catacombs of the Moon. It's all about faith. And and that was really that's what's really on the line here. It's science against faith. And it's almost like it's not only the moon and Etheria on a collision course, but it's almost like Koenig is on a collision course with the Alphans because of what is transpiring and what it has been delivered. So there's the physical aspect, and then there's the spiritual aspect, and then there's the emotional aspect. I mean, and they know him from the previous, I'll say episodes, the 12 episodes that happened prior to this story, I should say, and who his character is and everything, that they should have the trust in him. However, that trust has been tainted because they think he has radiation sickness. So that's where they're kind of like saying, but you might not be all there.
Yeah.
Even though science cleared him, and that's the thing too. Their devices, their medical readouts cleared him, saying he was okay. He did not have radiation sickness. Paul did not have radiation sickness. Alan did not have radiation sickness. However, he's going off in a different direction as far as what they should do. Right. So they can't accept that he would say something like that, and they're blaming it on the radiation sickness because it has to be, because what he's proposing again
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And even ARRA says to him, that is the test of your command.
Yes.
Yeah. And that it was so true. because he had to go back and try to convince them to do nothing when it was the least logical thing to do in the circumstances.
And she couldn't go back with him.
Right.
He has much to do.
That's right. That's right.
It's everything that would kind of like, oh, it would be so much easier, but not necessarily. And if I may, I'm going to throw a little of one of my favorite episodes in there, Matter of Life and Death. We've been down this road before. Lee Russell came to Alpha. He was transitioning. He had difficulty communicating. I love the episode, by the way, as Warren knows. And there's so much, I watch it so often, and if you just watch the lead character, he is totally out of it at first, and slowly becomes more aware of what's going on. What do you want? No, you can't do this. Zapping, like he is sending warning messages in every direction, and finally a big sit down with the red lighting, and you go to that planet no matter what I say. Here's the counterpoint to that. We've had somebody warn them and they didn't take the warning. Here, ARRA, you're on your own. You've got to trust me. And like you said, Nancy, this is a test of your command to convince, your Alphans. And it's an amazing episode because again, it harkens back to certain elements in a nice way, in a respectful way, of things we've seen, but just kind of little pieces, maybe moved around a little. But it's like an evolution. We're seeing Alpha and the Alphans at a different level. They've had all these experiences. They're still learning. They're still making mistakes. But there's something out there and somebody out there that wants to see them succeed. And isn't that kind of like life? I know it sounds a little high
well, no,
spiritual.
It wasn't just a test of his command, but it's almost like ARRA and her people were testing humanity. Because you know what, you guys, because this could have gone either way in my mind, and I'm just thinking, just hearing all this is just getting I love this episode, trust me. And I, it's the second big Mysterious Unknown Force episode. There's connections, and there's some people that say or think or theorize that ARRA was the voice in the Black Sun. But do you know what? Koenig, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Koenig, he asks ARRA to come back to the base, does he not?
He does.
Yes, he does.
And because he says clearly, they're not going to believe me, right? But if you come back and you see, when you look at it from this perspective, that should have worked, because the Alphans have been through a Black Sun. They've been through Matter of Life and Death. They've seen all these just undefinable things and experiences and events, and have survived them. And it should have by now, changed the perception of things, right?
Especially
so ARRA just showing up saying, "Hey, listen, we got this big, planet coming at you. You guys just
sit back and put your feet up. Don't worry about it."
Under normal circumstances, it would have been okay to challenge, but especially, and I agree about Matter of Life and Death, absolutely, but even more so the Black Sun, because of when him and Bergman, Koenig and Bergman encountered that, I'll say, entity, because we don't know what it was. And I mean, Bergman even says, "Are you God?" I mean, if anything, Bergman, you would think, would have sided a little bit more with Koenig. But again, it's the whole thing of the radiation sickness. It was almost like that was the fallback that was clouding their judgment on that, where they just couldn't get past it, because there was no way they could have an open mind about it. And you even see when it's in that heated discussion, I won't say argument, heated discussion at the command conference, when Koenig is going at it with Paul, Bergman turns and looks at Helena, and Helena looks at Bergman, and it's like, we know the direction this is going in. And then that's when it's like, then, he says, we have to listen to, to the commander Koenig, he hasn't failed us.
And look, Paul, in all of our months in space, right? There's been one common denominator between everything that's happened to us.
John Koenig.
been in command, right?
Exactly.
So they shouldn't have doubted it. So it's very interesting. But Richard, like as you were saying as well, with Matter of Life and Death, having taken that into consideration, maybe ARRA and her people, I mean, obviously they're omnipotent and they know all, and they're like the Q of Space 1999. But maybe they saw that encounter as a reason not to go, right? Because maybe they said, well, they're not going to believe us, so we'll just put John Koenig up to this, and because he's special, and maybe he's got a destiny, right? Sorry, I've been watching a little too much Babylon 5 recently, but they knew that he would be the one to convince them, and then of course along with that they had to get some help from Alan Carter as well. But oh boy, guys, this is just fascinating. I just love this.
Well, and you think John didn't have to go through this alone. In various episodes, he's not always the one that gets supported. He has to be the lone wolf. But in this one, Alan is there with him, and knows not everything that he knows, but he knows that whatever John is doing is something we should be doing. And that belief factor, I don't know if necessarily, that she was playing the Q adversary per se, but you really do get the sense that you humans the outcome of this is dependent on, I guess, both sides in a way fighting for what they believed, because there was that element. It's like they weren't wrong to think that they were not in their clear-headedness, right? They didn't see or hear or know what had been seen. They saw there was a ship there, and that's about all they knew. And it was kind of a faith on both sides. Both sides proved, in a way, their devotion and their belief in that. And there was a literal battle, they were duking out.
But I think that you see the threat of the radiation sickness is the variable that sort of set this apart from potentially any other situation, right? Because of what they've been through. They have seen all these remarkable things, of course, but it's again, and I'm going to circle back to human nature. It's human nature to
question.
Yes, and not accept the unacceptable, right? I mean, so if there's a mysterious cosmic force on the table versus radiation sickness, right? By nature, we're probably going to go, oh well, yeah, he's probably just got.
It's almost easier. It's almost easier to write it off because it's going to take more work to go in the other direction to say, okay, maybe this is possible. No, this isn't possible. You're losing your mind because you've got something, and that's case closed. It's easier to go in that direction. Again, it's a leap of faith, and that's what they were. Koenig was battling that with his own people, and the irony is that here everything would have been fine, and even in the end, it's tied up. It ties in beautifully when they have, Koenig is with Helena at the very end, and she says, "John, I'm sorry," and then he's like, "For what?" And he said, "If you did anything else, I'd want to know about it." He said, "How can anybody possibly know that a planet on a collision course would not collide but simply touch?" I mean, it's like, whoa,
it's one of, for me, space's greatest strengths. And I'm always sad when people, either criticize the show or question these things, because we don't know. There's so much we don't know, and I don't think we're ever going to know. There's always the great unknown of, when this life is over. Does it end? Do we come back as something? Do we get to go to another place? We don't know. We're never. I can't see how we'll ever know what's next until each of us experience it. And I look at an episode like this as being, it was a collective group experience by the Alphans to go through this terror. Are we going to all die? And we don't want to die. How can we prevent it? And then, and then it's what she said was true. The impossible kind of was true. It's a wonderful episode. I question John's. The only thing I struggled a little bit with the final conversation, I agreed with what he said, but in a way, I almost wanted Helena to say, I'll always believe in you. I'll never doubt you. You know what I mean? Because and it goes both ways. Like, he was appreciating that she did what he feels, she should have done. But I almost felt that the lesson out of this is sometimes you have to believe things that are seemingly, out of this world. And the show, for me, that was one of the best things about it. It just, each episode bringing forth an incredible mystery, and here we are 50 years later, and they're still talking. Like, as an example, they're questioning now, were physics different after the Big Bang? And that was something space proposed. Maybe physics are different here. How will we know? And maybe they were different then as opposed to today. And science wants everything. No, you drop a rock and it falls, and on Earth. In our situation, but maybe somewhere else, around a black hole, maybe that's not what happens. So I always love that. That's kind of my summation, I guess.
No, and one of the things you said too, Rich, about like, if with her saying that, almost we would want her to almost say that, but then the flip side of it is, if she had said that, she wouldn't have been in her character. That was, I think, one of her. She was such a strong character, especially more. And I hate to compare seasons, so I won't even do that. But especially though in the year one episodes, I mean, the compassion was definitely there. Obviously, I mean, she was torn with different scenarios. I mean, even we brought up Missing Link before, where she really didn't want to turn the switch off for John Koenig, because she knew what that meant. He was, but what was being shown was he really was on the verge of death. I mean, the machine was keeping him alive, and she didn't want to almost like fool herself. And even when she's challenging him, and it almost bothered me too that, he was challenging her, she was challenging him, and then at gunpoint, he said, Helena, if it's a choice. What bothered me about that is it's a stun gun. He could have stunned her. He didn't have
exactly. That was my thought too.
It's like, and obviously, and if you look at the stun gun, some of them have the selector on it, some of them don't. And I think the selector was actually introduced in Full Circle. I think that's the episode you first see that. But it's just that it is a stun gun, and he could have gone in that route. And then even with Paul, I mean, but more so with Helena. Helena is his love, and he's thinking of the greater good because of Alpha. He wants Alpha to survive, and that's, it's like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, not to quote Star Trek, or the one, in regards to that. But still, he could have stunned her, and she would not have had to have died. But that was more for dramatic purposes, of course.
I agree, and the only thing I could kind of add or counterpoint to that, I think maybe he was worried a point blank stun was a dangerous thing. We saw what it did to Cellini, right? He wasn't very far away, and he ended up in medical. So it could have been, if I have to stun you at short range like this, it's not like I'm going to run 15 feet back and stun you. I know it's not in the script. It's reaching, but again, if she's that close, you don't know how much more impactful it might be for her. And I think he was trying to say that, I don't want to hurt you, but we have to do this. And it showed, like you said, he's the greater good. But to do that to the person you care for, base never tread lightly.
See, this is great. This is why 50 years later, we're all here discussing the long-term versus short-term effects of a stun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It had to be me, Warren. It had to be me.
Well, and and even Paul even says to him, he goes, we're all going to die in a minute. Shoot me if you choose. It's like,
But you know what, guys, and the entire episode, when you look at it, is filled with that tension that we talked about at the beginning, right? Right up to the last name, and Richard, to your point, now I just lost my train of thought because I was being goofy. What was I going to say?
While you think, I can throw out a little something.
You go ahead. It'll come back.
Totally different. A little technobabble. I would have loved if, when they said they were laying the mines, that they were gravitational mines to create a gravitational shockwave. I know it's a small thing, but because I'm always hearing in Star Trek, oh, they explain this or that, and I don't always need to hear explanations, but I thought it would have been a nice touch to say, hey, we have these gravitational mines. The other ones we blew up the asteroid were nuclear charges.
Right.
But just one little thing that they probably wouldn't have thought of back 50 years ago. Right. But I think it would have added to the moment, because it's like, then, a gravitational explosion, to cause them to shear apart and not touch. But again, it only emphasizes to me all the elements of greatness were in space. If you had to color in the lines a little bit, to me, that was a small price to pay, because
that's all I was going to say, is that you touched on the fact that the episode is full of mystery. And that's, Roy and I have discussed this with previous guests in previous episodes, about the beauty of year one, 50 years later, if you will, is the fact that it didn't give you all the answers, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't give you that everything in a nice package with a bow on it in 52 minutes, right? And it kept the viewer on edge and constantly questioning existence and reality. And this episode is just it does all of that and so much more.
Especially since that if you try to answer those questions, the answer, you may not like it. You know what I mean? So it's like it's better to keep it open-ended, because that, as Warren just said, I mean, that's what really draws the viewer. And it's a lot of the shows always felt like, oh, we have to explain this, we have to explain that, and then a lot of times you'll watch something like, really, that's the explanation for that? That's what they're coming up with? And it's like that wouldn't happen. There's no way. And then where we are, we'll say, well, that would never happen. How you got to be kidding? That's really lame. And then you get the viewer that watches it, and it's like, oh wow, okay, there is no answer. But wait a minute, why isn't there an answer? There should be an answer. But you know what? That's really good, though, that there isn't. Go ahead, Warren.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
all of this, guys, and it really just jogged in my mind how similar this is. This entire concept of these episodes, very similar in style to something that happened this week, and why his movies are so impactful. A fellow named David Lynch passed away. And if you've ever seen a David Lynch movie, full on that you're never going to get those answers. You're never going to even get an ending per se. And if you can't deal with that, and you can't deal with non-linear storytelling, then you shouldn't be watching a David Lynch movie. But there again, I guess my point is, that's why his movies are so memorable and powerful and resonate with so many people for so long, is that, I mean, he didn't make many movies, but the ones he did, it's just, if you've seen them and you appreciate that style, it sticks with you like space has all these years.
And in respect to David Lynch, there's another television series from the 60s produced by ITC that actually did the same thing, and it was The Prisoner. Open-ended. I mean, especially the last episode, 17 episodes, and the last episode, it's like, what just happened? And
pretty much.
People have been talking about it, trying to figure out. There's been college classes on it. People have written theses on it. Patrick McGowan, you can go on the internet and you can search on YouTube, and it's amazing. And 50 plus years later, it was shot I think it was on in 68. It was shot in 67. So what we're looking at, 57 years now, 58 years, and people are still talking about The Prisoner. And I mean, how brilliant is that? It's the same type of scenario.
If there was going to be a ending logo, and this actually is more open-ended than you think, The Prisoner is you. Really, like, when you watch the episodes, in a way, you're a prisoner to, I don't understand, I'm trapped in this. It's an amazing show. The music is awesome. You know, how he is the smartest guy in the room more often than not. He may not be able to solve this, but they're not going to solve him either. In fact, he destroyed many, you know, in a way, he outwitted or whatever many a number one. And it's true. Like it's funny that you mention it. I wish in a way David Tomlin had been more involved in space, or if there was a second season. And again, to all those who love the second season, I would like to have had a second season, a continuation of the first. And then if that changed after that, I still would have had 24 more episodes kind of in the style that I preferred. But David Tomlin, I think he had an innate understanding of that, you know, that mystery, that he brought it to his episodes. And
Force of Life we were talking about just a few weeks ago, and I mean David Tomlin knocked that episode out of the park. There's so much, I mean, imagery and the photography. Just it was brilliant right from the teaser, when the opening, you know, when everything happens to him, and the camera goes upside down, and you talk about, you know, the symbolism of what is going to happen on Moonbase Alpha. Everybody is, you know, the world is going to be turned upside down. It was brilliant. It was, that could have been a movie. I mean, a lot of these episodes, this one included, could have been a movie. And this episode, speaking of which, actually in a sense did become a movie, because this was one of the episodes that was linked with and with, you know, David Hirsch, our friend David Hirsch. I mean, this became part of the space
Super Space Theater package.
Space Theater.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was paired with Black Sun in Journey Through the Black Sun.
Yes.
Yeah. And two, you know, and again, it makes complete sense that, you know, they were looking for episodes that would pair together nicely and have a similar or consistent running theme. And of course, Black Sun and Collision Course are perfectly matched.
Exactly.
And it's funny, until you said that, you know, I just thought about this recently. I saw somebody note that they thought that the voice inside the Black Sun was ARRA, but they probably got that from years and years of us seeing those two episodes back to back, right? And that was probably the intention that David Hirsch had, was to maybe make the viewer think that it was the same entity.
Right. Well, I found one really interesting thing that ARRA said to Koenig before he got back on his Eagle. He asked what was going to happen to them. And she said, "Your odyssey shall know no end, and you will populate the deepest reaches of space." I found that super, super interesting. And then we go to London this past September, and we have that little teaser clip that Anton Phillips narrated that they did go on, right? And I just found that when I watched it again yesterday, those lines just jumped right out at me. And I thought, yeah, you know, the mystery, the saga continues, right? We don't really know. And unfortunately, in some ways, I agree with Rich that it would have been great to see the format from season 1 carry on for at least another season, because I think there was a lot of development there with lots of potential and possibilities.
And I agree.
Not to take away from season 2, because I enjoyed that as well. But
and to your point, I think a lot of the things that season 2 that people said were the positives, it could have happened with our year 1 group without necessarily, you know, the shock changes. I'll put it as simply as that. Whether it was, you know, Kano or somebody, you know, doing something interesting. It didn't have to be beer. Could have been mushroom, you know, whatever. But I think some of those kind of interesting, you know, human moments, they were there and we saw them. They might be brief, but some of my favorite scenes, you know, in Dragon's Domain, when John brings her the flowers, you know, I might have had some help from hydroponics, you know, like a lot of these touching moments that showed the depth of their caring. They were going to run up to one another and, you know, hug and that. It wasn't exactly that type of show, but there were that moment. These moments. Back to Sarah Bullen for 1 second. when they're all tense in main mission, Victor comes by and just kind of gives her a tap, or a little touch on the shoulder.
That's
and
right.
she kind of looks at him like, thank you, type of thing. Like, there was this group, I think, not just from a character point of view, I think from a personal, group, human type of thing, they liked one another. I think they really enjoyed, doing the show together. And those moments, they didn't like blow them out bigger. They just were there.
They were subtle.
They were very, but
subtle works because that's more every day. I mean, that's and the other thing is, well, and you brought up about when Victor taps Sarah Bullen on the shoulder and she looks up and she smiles. But then there's also the Alphen that loses it. I mean, and that was a reality moment because she basically runs and it's like she has nowhere to run. Victor grabs her and he holds her to try to calm her down. That was showing humanity right there with that. And the other thing is tying in. It's the first, and again, I really don't want to get in comparison but the first season at least. It was like a functioning moon base, and it was a science center. I mean, it was not intended to be it wasn't a starship. It wasn't meant to be the Enterprise, and it definitely wasn't intended to be reference Star Trek: The Next Generation. I mean, I was a huge Next Generation fan. It wasn't meant to be the Enterprise D, where you have families on board. Although they swayed away from that in the later seasons. Yeah. It's just. That was more conveyed in the first series of Space 1999. It was a scientific community, and they were making do. I mean, again, Force of Life, where you had Anton Zoroff and you had Eva Zoroff together. I mean, it would have been interesting to know how that actually came about. Were they married on Moonbase Alpha, or were they a husband and wife team that came to the moon before that? I mean, I guess that would be a great fan story, in fanzines or what have you. How did that relationship occur and develop? Because we're actually seeing, the personal side of existing on Alpha. And even with that, when he makes the comment, I need a breath of fresh air. And then she says, we can all do with that on Alpha. And he's like, well, I have to take a walk down the corridor. That was the reality of the situation. And you really felt that in these first 24 episodes. It really was conveyed with them trying to deal with that. And it's the same thing with this story. And it works very, very well.
It does. And if I can put one little thought in, with so many newer series, and there's been a lot of great ones. I love The Expanse, by the way. The show From.
I'm sorry, what did you say? What? Can you repeat that, please? Major love for The Expanse.
I love it.
You and I talked about it. It's wow.
As you rewatch it, you can really. It's like the kind of like space in a sense. There's stuff going on. There's little kids hugging in the first episode. I'm like, why are these kids hugging? I never noticed it the first time. It's not an important thing, but it shows a real life dynamic, and it excels at so many awesome moments. But what I was going to say in the show From, we also really enjoy. I highly recommend it. And what's cool with space, if it could have gone on, is just imagine in year 2, there's a flashback and there's John talking to Zoroff in the nuclear generating area. Like, the space had so much potential, even with what it had done, in a sense to revisit it, if done in a way that was creative, like the last 2 episodes. The narration, looking back at moments. I think space had so many, so much additional backstory to tell. And whether it was a moment with Zoroff and his wife, bring back those characters and have a scene that's relevant to a new episode they're doing now, and weaving it in. And it's never good to think too much about it, because then the what ifs, right? But I do know that the show had so much potential because they were so creative, And I think if they had sat down and, hey, what if we do something that brings back some of these characters and we can kind of expand the universe a little bit. And, they could show John and Cellini in another example of something that happened in a mission. Anything was possible. Even Victor, how did Victor end up on the base again? And why was he stuck? But again, not to take away from everything that was done. I just feel, I felt at the time the show was really, like Martin Landau has said, it was finding its voice, finding its stride. I think it could have been something else, just like that cat behind Warren in the background.
Did you see that leap?
I just saw that, yeah.
That was a leap of faith, Warren.
Yeah, but I never tire of it. I haven't been watching it as much because I was busy. I'll segue a little bit on the hockey book I was working on. But it's always great to revisit, and I'm always never disappointed. And it was in a 70s show, but when you're watching Collision Course, it moves. Like there's a scene and a shot and a camera angle, and then you're over here with this. A lot's happening. Kudos to Ray Austin. So many characters involved, so many character moments, ensemble moments. You've got these three talking, you got this group talking, you're in John's quarters here, like you're in medical. That episode, looking at it, might have the most action in terms of different things going on, all within that tight circle of what they're facing. So that's my.
It definitely is moving. It's fast paced. There's a strong story. It has all. It basically, you're checking the box when you're checking the box for things you want in an episode. And 52 minutes, it really covers a lot. This isn't one of those stories that could actually probably have been a two-parter. It could have gone a lot deeper. I mean, there's some things that kind of, like, for example, with Koenig, when Helena says, John's going to have to be confined to his quarters and heavily sedated. We see that there's like a flask, and obviously the flat or measuring. It's like it always in the back of my mind is, how was that? I mean, he pretty much knew where he stood, and then we see him sleeping in his quarters. So in my mind is, I would have thought she would have hypoed him maybe, but that is inferring that he drank it willingly. So
willingly,
yeah. So how did that come about? I always wanted to know that. I mean, that question is always running in my mind every time I see that 4 seconds of him sleeping, and then you see that there, and then of course ARRA wakes him up, and then he comes back. So that was something that I always kind of questioned. Did you did the three of you Warren, did you feel that way about that?
That scene is, I've never really thought about it in those terms, Roy, but to me it's most memorable for the focus pull that Ray Austin uses, because when the scene starts, it's like he's looking through a little tube that's sitting on the ledge, and all of a sudden this massive focus pull comes, and it's just like whoosh, and it's almost like the twist in reality that maybe Koenig's thinking or feeling, or ARRA playing with his mind or something, right? But it's but no, I think it's there's just so much to unravel here. We could talk about this episode another hour easily, guys.
We could, yeah. We're actually we're at the 1 hour and 21 mark, so we're going to probably have to wind things down. One thing real quick. Just want to give a shout out to in regards to the special effects. Martin Bauer had built the ARRA ship. This was the third time that he contributed, and also it was Brian Johnson's design for ARRA's ship. And also there was the nuclear mines that were constructed. There were 2 different scales for this as well. And then the other thing is he had built a 5.51 inch eagle, which I thought that was really cool to find out about. So, and that, of course, when it's coming out of our ship. So I just wanted to throw those things out there as well in regards to that.
Yeah, 100%.
And then my last comment is in regards to continuity. We hear about interstellar strength, and that is also mentioned in Death's Other Dominion. as well. And then also the beacon, the identification mark with the satellite. We find out that there's an orbital satellite around Moonbase Alpha. I thought that was an interesting type of component. And we actually hear that beacon in another time, another place, when Koenig and Allen go to the moon when they find it and it's evacuated because of Operation Exodus. There's one component that's left that's going, and it's actually that beacon that's going on. So I just wanted to throw that out there because we're talking about continuity.
Now, good points. I had kind of noticed the same thing, and it again, to Nancy's point, this is a real operation. And these things are out there, and you're not going to hear about them all the time, but it's a continuity aspect that I really enjoyed, because funny enough, space didn't necessarily have a lot of techno babble, but it sure had a lot of technology, and you do see and hear them using that technology, and they're just using it. They're not like making a point. I'm about to use, the atomic blaster. Like they just, I'm using the atomic blaster, whatever, you know what I mean. But that sense of this is Alpha, and this is the place we are, and we live right now, and whatever we need to do, it was really. It's cool to revisit that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, and we have talked about Star Trek a lot. Star Trek: The Next Generation, in particular, when it comes to storytelling, did sort of rely a little too much on the technobabble, right? To a fault, to the point where it was using technobabble to get out of each and every situation, right? It was a nice dynamic or component that a lot of other shows didn't have, and it was just simply because really the extent of the techno babble would have been maybe from Victor, a time or two, but it wasn't like each and every time Victor was like, "Oh yeah, John, well, that's because," and it gives you that nice little package with the bow, right? In avoiding techno babble, it does lead to more mystery, right? And with certain things, but listen, as Roy was just saying, we have gone on for almost an hour and a half. This has been fantastic, guys. We wanted to take just a moment. Richard, you mentioned your wonderful Summit Series book that you'd worked on. Can you just maybe take a couple seconds to tell us all about that?
Sure, I really appreciate the opportunity, guys.
The viewers can get a copy.
It's currently live on Amazon. This is an update of the book I did back in 2012. It's got fabulous color in it. I've kind of highlighted the cover to kind of make it look like it's lit up. It's the story between Canada and the Soviets back in 1972, where we fought our battles on the ice, as opposed to, sadly, what's happening today. But basically, it's 1 inch, 437 pages of corrected stats. I found the original hockey stats, a lot of errors were made, and that's kind of how it all started. The DVDs came out in 2002. My wife got them for me Boxing Day. I'm going to see if they made any mistakes. First goal, I found an error. Second goal, I had to fix a mistake. Third goal scored. So in a nutshell, 63 goals scored in the series. I had to do revisions, corrections on 42 of them. But this is the story. It's, again, live on Amazon if anyone's interested. I've gotten a lot of great feedback with it. It was a lot of work, but I'm very happy with it. I'm hoping to have it black and white and ebook soon. But as with all things, it takes a bit of time. But thank you for letting me share that with everyone. And if anyone's interested, I'm on Facebook. And again, if they'd like to check it out, I hope you do. Thank you.
No problem. And Nancy Ehle.
Yes.
You've also published something recently.
I did. It's a science fiction novel. It's called The Timekeepers, A Play for Time. It is Not actually in publication right now. The publisher went out of the publishing business, but I do still have some myself. And it is basically a time travel story. It's on the premise that in about the year 2050, we discover a new energy source at the bottom of the ocean in the form of a stable transuranic element. And when they're in the process of testing it, not knowing initially what they have a little accident, open up a rift in the space-time continuum, and suck somebody in from another reality. And we jump ahead to the year like 2356 or something, and this individual who was drawn in has not aged a day since she arrived. And in that period of time, they have developed the technology to open time portals. And they have a base on the moon, of course. And what they do is they send historians back in time to study history in person as events happened. So they're able to correct a lot of the information that was not reported correctly and all that kind of stuff. They have the ability to actually record people's memories. So they go on these trips, they come back to the lab, they're hooked up to the computer, and anybody can walk into a data bank, sit down, and have that experience from the time traveler. And of course, they get stranded in the past on a mission. And there's all sorts of political stuff going on at the time lab with a politician trying to get his hands on the funding. And so he's trying to discredit the main character while she's stuck in the past with one of her students. So my mom read it, and so did another gal from Minnesota, and they both said the same thing. It reads like a mystery novel.
Well, congrats. So, how many pages, Nancy?
It is, let's see now. That's my music on hold.
It's okay.
391 pages.
291. That's amazing.
Nice. Excellent.
Thank you. And I have a copy here myself.
Oh.
Yeah. So Nancy, if somebody wanted a copy, how could they reach out to you? And
they could probably try to reach out to me on Facebook, or they could email me at nehle@hotmail.ca.
Excellent.
Wow.
Well,
excellent.
I love the lightning.
Yes, I know. I was going to say, if you ever do a sequel or a revision to that, you could maybe have somebody travel back through time to 1972 to the Summit Hockey Series
and get all the details right.
Yeah. Well, if you did that, then my book would no longer exist.
It would no longer
be there. Yeah. Do you know? I would rather go back to like 1974 and be there when they're filming Space 1999.
Yeah, it'd be.
Oh, good.
No, that's awesome, Nancy.
Cool.
Those are terrific, guys, and
congrats to both of you on that. That's great.
Yeah,
thank you
for sure. Over to Roy.
Yeah, I will just give a plug for the upcoming episode. So Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. We are actually going to be hitting our 250th episode tomorrow night, which is going to be today when you're watching this broadcast. So if you want to tune in, the latest episode will be on it this coming Sunday, which is going to be the 19th of January at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And my very special guest will be Adam Nimoy, son of Leonard Nimoy. And he will be talking about his latest book, which is called The Most Human.
Oh, cool.
So I'm looking forward to having him on, especially for hitting the 250th episode.
Wow.
Been on since April 3rd of 2020. And such
really good.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that.
Wow.
Yeah, I created the show to bring people together because of everything going on with COVID. So it was... we were all in isolation, and I thought, what better topic than to talk about science fiction? And fast forward 5 years, and still going. So very happy about that.
Well, congratulations. That sounds like a very
thank you.
Well done.
Coming up, yeah.
And Warren, what do you got to tell us about?
Well, listen, I wanted to mention both Nancy and Richard's wonderful shirts that they're wearing tonight. And
Eagle
Richard,
6
yours.
crew, Daryl Simmons, thank you, sir, and all the Eagle
6
construction crew.
Mm-hmm.
Daryl and his crew are the men. They are amazing.
Yes, they are.
I'm
Very,
a
very
proud
special
honorary
moment.
member.
Yeah, got to share back in September there. That entire build was really remarkable.
Oh, that command module was something else. Oh my word.
And then Nancy, you have a shirt that's been signed by Nick Tate.
Yes, this is actually artwork that I did back in, I think it was 1994. The date years on there somewhere. Did it up as a shirt to wear in London, and Nick graciously signed it for me. So this is the last time I'll be wearing it. It's going in a frame.
Nice, very nice.
Excellent, excellent.
Thanks for wearing it on our episode. This is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna have to reach out to get Daryl and get him on a future episode as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to end off in saying that we had last week sort of referenced the fires in Los Angeles, which are still ongoing, believe it or not. So we kept the ticker up, and coupled with the aforementioned news about David Lynch. David Lynch actually had to evacuate his home a week ago as well, and he was very ill and suffered from emphysema, and so it's unfortunate, but he probably caught something along the way and fell prone to it. So very, very tragic week. And I also find it's obviously very much a symbolic gesture that a lot of theaters and marquees around the world are paying tribute to David Lynch in putting up tributes and words on the marquees, but I also find it, in a strange sense, it's also paying tribute to Los Angeles and Hollywood in general. The gesture with everything that's gone on down there the last couple of weeks with the fires, and it's just incredible how much destruction and how much these fires have ravaged so much territory and history.
It's horrendous.
Warren, do you have any info on the Fire Aid concert that's coming up?
No, I haven't heard of it. I can probably surmise what it's likely going to be. A bunch of artists coming together to lend support or something.
Just heard about it yesterday. I'm not sure where it's being held, but for everyone, probably by the time they see this, there's going to be even more announcements. But it is heartwarming, literally. You think back to Live Aid, and I was listening to it was a BlackRock CEO. You'd be wondering, why would BlackRock CEO be talking about the fires? But I guess they have so many investments and insurance company connections and all that. And he gave us a very sobering analysis that it's going to take a long, long time. Rebuilding a house is one thing. You got to rebuild all the businesses and the schools, everything that people need. And he said, that's going to be a long time of recovery. And not to sound negative, but 7 to 10 years. And I think if people are thinking, you know what, it's not going to be overnight. I'm sure, maybe it'll be faster than we imagine, depending on how things work out. But I just wanted to mention that, certainly with events like Fire Aid and hopefully the new administration is not going to be as dumb as, they might be, because anybody who needs help, no matter who they are, they shouldn't be denied just because they have a differing point of view. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, it's going to take some time, but our hearts and minds are with everybody in this situation, this recent crisis, and let's keep the spirit alive. Of course, we're all aiming to be in Los Angeles and Burbank in just a few months' time. So hopefully our plans aren't thwarted in any way with what's going on down there. I don't anticipate any problems, but it's when things like this happen, you do have to reconsider a lot of factors. But we've had discussions, and it's onward and upward at this point with the convention. So, the other thing I wanted to mention real quick, Nancy, thank you for mentioning the teaser trailer that was premiered in London back a few months ago with Anton's narration. And in relation to that ARRA dialogue from Collision Course, to circle back to that, to round out the show, keep watching. Because I don't think it's a big surprise that there is something in development along that in regards to that project called Return to Moonbase Alpha. So we will be working on something over the next few months, and it'd be very exciting to see. There might be a special preview come September, and we'll take it from there. So, but thank you for all that. And to everybody out there, just a reminder to hit the like and subscribe button on the Space 1999 This Episode YouTube channel. It really helps with the algorithms and gets us out there to a few more people. Roy, what you got?
I think I'm just going to, when we cast off for tonight, I think I'm just going to say until tomorrow. But before I do that, I will say that we will be back next week to talk about episode number 14, if you can believe that, and going in production order. And that episode is, of course, Death's Other Dominion. Looking forward to that. That's going to be another fantastic discussion of another fantastic episode. So
just in time for the deep freeze.
Just in time for the deep freeze. Yep, it's definitely all I'm going to have to do is go outside in the snow tonight and get my notes out, and I'll be working on Death's Other Dominion, and I'll be doing the the reality check in reality in the cold.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks very much, you guys, and thanks to everybody out there for tuning in. This has been a great episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And we will see you again in 7 days for Death's Other Dominion.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to see you guys.
You too.
Appreciate being on.
Thanks again.
Bye.